Imagine you're waking up, not in a bed but on a straw mat. The room is dim, cold in the early hours, thick with the breath of sleeping bodies. You are not a warrior by choice. You are a gladiator, by debt, by punishment, or by purchase. Your day begins not with glory, but with groaning joints and the scrape of iron shackles. You sleep in a barracks beside others like you, slaves, prisoners, or men who gambled everything for a shot at survival, or perhaps the illusion of it. Outside, the training yard awaits. The sand is dry, uneven, and faintly metallic from old blood now long absorbed. But this is no arena. This is repetition. Relentless drills under the eye of your lanista, your trainer and keeper. He watches without pity. To him, you are investment. Meat on legs sharpened or wasted. There is a rhythm to the day. You learn to fall without injury, to feint, to parry, not just for survival, but for style. Rome does not pay to see awkward flailing. The crowd demands a show. Each strike you practice is calculated. How to draw out pain, how to delay death, how to make it beautiful. You eat, when permitted, barley, legumes, the occasional meat scrap, high in energy, low in flavor. A gladiator's diet, crafted not for strength of spirit but for bulk and endurance. You are being fattened like livestock. Injuries are common, some minor, blisters, bruises, pulled muscles, others fester. You learn to wrap wounds tightly and keep training, because the medicus, the camp doctor, is no miracle worker. And always, there is the smell. Leather soaked with sweat, iron tinged with rust, the sourness of men forced too close for too long. By nightfall, you rest. Not because you're ready, but because your body insists. You lie still, barely hearing the snores of others, ears ringing from drills. Some pray, others dream of escape. A few dream of the arena, not for victory, but for the chance to die cleanly, quickly, and in front of someone who might remember their name. But most, they simply endure, because tomorrow will be the same. The arena is not as frequent as people believe. A gladiator may train for weeks, even months before facing combat. You are expensive after all. Death must be timed for maximum profit. But when the day does arrive, you wake earlier than usual. Your fellow fighters do not speak much. There's a hush, a subtle dread in the air. Some wear charms, others trace symbols into the dirt. Even those who seem fearless avoid your eyes. You are dressed not for protection, but for performance. Different types of gladiators wear different armor, each with their own rules. The Murmillo carries a broad sword and shield. The Retiarius fights with a net and trident, nearly naked, dancing on the edge of danger. You do not choose your role. It is chosen for you. As you wait in the darkness beneath the arena, the roar of the crowd swells above. It is a sound that no longer startles you. It is always there, hungry, faceless. And then, the gates open. The light is blinding at first. The sun glares off sand. You feel your heartbeat, not just from fear, but from expectation. You do not know if today's fight is to the death. Sometimes the editor of the games, the one who funds and directs the event, spares the loser. Other times, he does not. It depends on the crowd, on your performance, on luck. Sometimes, it depends on whether you were simply too expensive to waste. You fight. Not wildly, but with practiced rhythm. Each move, each breath, echoing what you learned, over and over, beneath the trainer's whip. The sand shifts beneath you. Your arm aches. The sun stings your eyes. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it is over. Perhaps you win. Perhaps you fall. If you live, you return. To your cell, your rations, your drills. If you lose but please the crowd, you might be spared. And if not, you are not buried as a soldier. You are not remembered as a hero. You are just replaced. Because there is always another man willing or forced to wear the armor. Gladiators were symbols of violence, yes, but more than that, they were victims of monotony, of hierarchy, of entertainment without empathy. To be a gladiator was not to be brave, or strong, or free. It was to be watched, to perform until the crowd lost interest, and to be kept alive. just long enough to die dramatically. The arena taught silence. But Spartacus learned to speak with a sword. His story begins not in the heart of Rome, but far away, in Thrace, a region of forests, mountains, and shifting alliances. He may have served as a soldier at first, or perhaps as a mercenary. Records are scattered, shaped more by Roman interpretation than by clarity. What we do know is that he was enslaved, taken, likely after battle or rebellion, perhaps betrayed, perhaps simply outmatched, and sold, not to a farm nor a mine, but to the ludus of Lentulus Batiatus, a gladiator training school in Capua. Here, Spartacus became a gladiator, not by choice, not by ambition, but because he was strong and Rome had an appetite. But Spartacus was not simply strong. He was observant. He saw the routines, the cracks in the system, the way guards rotated, the way supplies moved, and quietly, over time, he planned. In the year 73 BCE, alongside around 70 other gladiators, Spartacus initiated an escape. They seized kitchen knives first, improvised, desperate, and then larger weapons as they overpowered their captors. They fled Capua and took refuge on Mount Vesuvius. Not the Vesuvius we think of today, silent and looming. No, this one was active with vegetation, with paths only locals truly understood. From here the rebellion grew. At first they were dismissed, just escaped slaves, rabble, unorganized. But Spartacus and his fellow leaders, Crixus and Euanomius, knew how to use that underestimation. They began to win. Roman forces were sent and repelled. More slaves joined them, farmhands, shepherds, and eventually, free men disillusioned with the Republic. Their numbers swelled, some say over 70,000 at its peak. But this was not chaos. Spartacus instituted rules, training, discipline. He punished looting. He focused on survival, not plunder. His aim, perhaps escape, to cross the Alps and scatter. Or perhaps something more, something Rome feared. A reversal of power. The rebellion was not just violence, it was an idea that those born to be stepped on could rise. And for nearly 2 years, Rome couldn't stop him. The Senate sent general after general. Spartacus defeated them. At one point, he even offered terms, perhaps thinking it better to end with honor than to burn with ambition. Rome refused. Eventually, they called upon Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome, ambitious, ruthless, determined to use the rebellion to secure power. Crassus implemented harsh discipline in his army, reviving the ancient practice of decimation, where every 10th soldier was executed if the group showed cowardice. He cornered Spartacus in the south, and although Spartacus broke through the lines once more, the tide was turning. The final battle came near the Silarus River. Spartacus, outnumbered, fought fiercely. He is said to have killed 2 centurions himself before falling. His body was never found. In the aftermath, over 6,000 of his followers were crucified along the Appian Way, the long road leading into Rome, left as a message, a warning, a grotesque display. But the fear lingered. Rome had not been threatened from within in this way for generations. Spartacus became a symbol. To some, a dangerous radical. To others, a hero who nearly rewrote the script written for him at birth. And yet, there is no statue of Spartacus in Rome. No temple, no tomb. His legacy lives more in the questions he raised than in monuments. What if slaves could organize? What if the spectacle of control cracked? What if the arena answered back? Beneath layers of ash, time lay frozen. Pompeii, once a bustling Roman town of perhaps 11,000 souls, was smothered by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE. But in being destroyed, it was also preserved. Entire streets, homes, shops, and public baths entombed in silence. And on the walls, etched, scrawled, scratched in charcoal or pigment, remained the voices of the people. Graffiti. Not in the modern sense of protest art or elaborate murals, but notes, thoughts, jokes, advertisements, prayers, insults, love, whispers of daily life. Walk through a typical street in Pompeii, and the buildings feel eerily intact. You pass under archways still standing, tread cobbled streets still grooved by cartwheels. You may imagine the sound of sandals, the smell of baking bread, the rustle of togas, but it's the graffiti that breathes. On a tavern wall, I screwed the barmaid. Crudely written, carelessly phrased. A boast, a lie, a truth shouted into stone. Nearby, another wall reads, "Whoever loves, let him flourish. Let him perish who knows not love." Part poem, part spell. You begin to see the contrasts between vulgarity and poetry, between desire and boredom. Inside a wealthy house, on a wall of plaster polished smooth. "Health to the house of Lucius. May your fortune always rise." Then another, barely legible. "Lucius owes me 10 denarii. A reminder scratched like a grudge. Graffiti appeared everywhere, on columns, walls, door frames, even in bathhouses. It was anonymous but intimate. People spoke to each other, to the gods, and to time itself. In the gladiator barracks, where men like Spartacus might have slept, you find names. Salatus the Thracian makes the girls sigh. Some scribbles reveal electioneering. "I urge you to vote for Marcus Holconius Priscus, a worthy man." But others are quieter. "I miss my mother." A simple line, barely scratched, perhaps by a child, or by someone too old to write well. These markings remind us that history is not just made by senators or generals, but by bakers, prostitutes, scribes, thieves, and lonely hearts. Even in leisure, their words linger. In a garden wall near a dining area, "Beware of dog." And in the atrium of a once grand house, now a hushed ruin, "Love is like war, easy to begin, hard to end." Then as you move toward the edge of town, you find graffiti that seems to know what's coming. Enjoy life while you can. Tomorrow is uncertain. And nothing lasts forever. The people of Pompeii lived unaware of the catastrophe waiting beneath the mountain. But their thoughts, trivial, profound, funny, bitter, were carved with no audience in mind. Now, centuries later, you listen. It's almost as though by reading their words, you become the echo they never expected. Imagine yourself, a guest in the home of a wealthy Roman patrician in the 1st century CE. You've been invited to a cena, a formal evening banquet. The marble floors beneath your feet are smooth and veined, cooled by shade and careful architecture. Mosaic tiles depict mythological scenes underfoot. The air is scented faintly with lavender and myrrh, stirred by the slow movement of palm frond fans in the hands of enslaved attendants. You recline, not sit, on a cushioned couch arranged around a low table. You're positioned by status, important guests closest to the host, less important ones further down the line. You may not speak until the host speaks to you. Your posture, even your eye contact, is quietly monitored. The meal begins, slowly. First, the gustatio, the appetizer course. You're offered eggs, olives, pickled vegetables, and little sausages dusted with honey and poppy seeds. A server pours a diluted wine into your shallow cup. Wine is never taken neat, and its blend of herbs, salt, or even seawater gives it a strange, acquired flavor. The conversation is light. Oratory, politics, literature, performed more than shared. Each man seeks to display wit or erudition, but with a languid coolness. Then the main course, the prima mensa. This is no rustic meal. You are presented with dormice, roasted and stuffed with pine nuts and herbs. There is flamingo tongue, yes, a delicacy. There's wild boar glazed in honey, its skin crisped and glistening. Fish arrives in sauces so complex they defy description. Garum, a fermented fish sauce beloved by Romans, features prominently. The smell is sharp, unmistakable. Between courses, servants sweep the floor with soft brushes collecting crumbs. Some guests excuse themselves to discreetly vomit, allowing them to return for more. This is not hidden, but not spoken of either. The emetic bowl in the corridor is understood. Wealth is not shown in restraint, but in excess. The silverware glints in lamplight, delicate, custom engraved. The cups are glass, imported from the East. Entertainment begins. A poet recites in lilting Latin, his verses long and winding. A musician plucks the cithara. Perhaps even a small troupe of dancers enters, faces painted, feet bare. You, meanwhile, are still eating. Quail's eggs, then roasted peacock, then marinated sea urchins. The patrician host smiles, his teeth stained faintly from spiced wine. He tells a story of his exploits in Gaul. The room listens, silent, deferential. No one interrupts. Dessert arrives, secunda mensa. Figs, dates, honey cakes, almonds, pomegranate seeds floating in wine syrup. And finally, more wine, stronger now. Laughter thickens. A few guests grow loud, but no one remarks upon it. Some begin philosophical debates. Others drift into quiet murmurs about scandal, inheritance, gossip about rival households. The room is warm from oil lamps. The scent of smoke and sweetness clings to your skin. You begin to feel heavy, full not only with food, but with the weight of performance, hierarchy, and opulence. This was not a meal. It was a theater of power. To be seen dining well in Rome was as important as dining itself. Every course, every word spoken, every gesture reflected one's place in the world. The poor, the working, the enslaved. They might live on barley porridge and dried onions, hunched over shared bowls. But here, among marble busts and painted ceilings, men drank pearls dissolved in vinegar to show they could. And still, beneath the silk cushions and gold goblets, an emptiness lingered, an endless hunger to be envied, to be remembered. The Romans conquered the world, but could not stop dining. Why you wouldn't last a day in a medieval city, picture yourself, waking up on a straw mattress. The room around you is dim. A small shuttered window lets in a sliver of pale early morning light. The air is heavy with the scent of damp timber, smoke from last night's fire and the faint tang of animals below. You're in a small wooden home, shared with your family, perhaps 3, 4, even 5 others in the same room. If you're lucky, there's a hearth. If not, the only warmth is from the closeness of bodies. The straw you slept on is old. It's probably home to more than just straw. Lice and fleas are constant companions in this world, but no one talks much about them. They are as much a part of life as the bell that tolls from the nearby church tower, marking time not in hours, but in moments of prayer, labor, and sleep. You rise, wash your face with cold water from a wooden basin, and pull on a rough woolen tunic. There's no soap, no toothbrush. Hygiene as you know it doesn't exist. The city around you is already waking. Merchants shouting, hooves clacking against uneven cobbles. A dog barks somewhere near the tanner's yard. You step outside, and the street is alive. But it isn't paved. Not really. The ground is a mix of packed earth, scattered straw, and refuse. Rainwater collects in ruts and ditches. There's no sewer system, just open drains that wind through the alleys, carrying everything away. Or at least somewhere else. Chamber pots are emptied from windows above, with a quick call of warning. Gardy Lou. If you're in Edinburgh, elsewhere, no such courtesy. The contents hit the street with a dull splash and join the rest of the city. S-breath. Sour, ripe, ever-changing. You try to move quickly past the tanner's shop. Tanning is necessary and unbearable. Animal hides soak in vats of urine and lime. The smell is, well, it's best not to dwell. But it clings to everything nearby. The cobbles, the air, even the clothing of those who work there. Next door might be a butcher's stall. Fresh meat hung on hooks in the open air. No glass, no refrigeration. Just the cold of the season and the hope it sells before the flies come. Further along, a baker is already at work. Bread was the heart of the medieval diet. Coarse, dark loaves made from rye or barley, sometimes mixed with ground beans or oats. If you're wealthy or lucky, you might get wheat. But for most, the bread is heavy, gritty, sometimes even laced with ground-up millstone from overused grinding stones. You pass a blacksmith, his forge glowing red in the gloom. Sparks rise as he hammers a horseshoe into shape. The rhythm of the anvil, sharp, deliberate, is strangely comforting. A constant in a city that never quite sleeps. And all around you, buildings lean toward one another. Upper floors jut out past lower ones, casting the narrow street into near-permanent shadow. Wood beams groan and creak. Some buildings have been repaired again and again, patched with whatever materials were available. A tapestry of survival. The streets are narrow, winding, irregular. Maps are nearly useless here. You navigate by memory, by scent, by habit. And then there's the noise. Hammers, hooves, children crying, vendors shouting. The clanging of church bells, the rustle of carts, the coughs of the sick, and the soft murmurs of monks in procession. It never truly stops. But fire. Fire is always a fear. Most buildings are wood, roofed in thatch. Chimneys are rare. Hearth fires smolder through the night. A single spark, a gust of wind, and an entire quarter might vanish in smoke and ash. And yet, amid all this, life flows. There are markets filled with spices and fabrics from lands you've never seen. There are songs in the taverns and stories told by candlelight. There's laughter, even here. Children play with hoops and bones. Women gather at the well, gossiping quietly. A peddler displays painted icons, their colors dulled by dust. A fiddler plays near the church steps, his melody winding through the air like incense. And as the sun begins to set, the city changes. Shadows stretch long, doors close, candles flicker behind shuttered windows. The watchmen begin their rounds, their staffs tapping slowly against the stones. Curfew approaches. You return home, to your corner, your fire, your straw. The sounds soften, the air cools. Another day has passed, and you've made it through. Just barely. Not many would. Not in this place. Not in a medieval city. But before we move on, before we leave behind this winding warren of stone and smoke, let us pause. Because cities like fire have long memories, and one city in particular would soon be tested in a trial of flame unlike any other. Let's travel now to 17th century London, a city on the brink. The Great Fire of London, a city in ashes. The city is quieter now, larger, more complex. It's the year 1666, and London has grown far beyond its medieval roots. The timber-framed buildings still lean inward over cobbled lanes, but the streets are busier. The economy is stronger. England's capital pulses with trade and ambition, but beneath the surface, the city remains dangerously flammable. The houses are packed closely, separated by little more than whispers. Many still cling to the old ways. Wooden structures, open hearths, narrow alleys. And summer has been long and dry. You live in the heart of it, near Pudding Lane, a place of bakers and barrels of warmth and wood smoke. Your neighbor is Thomas Farriner, a baker to the Royal Navy. He works late into the night, as bakers do, feeding the ovens that supply the city with bread. And it is there, in the quiet of early September, that something small, something almost invisible, begins. A spark. A simple ember left smoldering too long. By morning, flames are racing through Farriner's home. The family escapes through an upstairs window, but the blaze doesn't stop. It leaps from roof to roof, drawn by the wind. Thatched coverings ignite like dry grass. Tar-covered walls surrender to the heat. The fire becomes a creature of its own, hungry, tireless, alive. Londoners awaken to chaos. You do too. The sky glows orange even before dawn. Ash drifts through the air like black snow. Children cry. Men form lines with buckets, passing water hand to hand. But it's not enough. The flames are too quick, the wind too strong. By midday, the fire has reached the Thames. Warehouses along the river burst open, full of oil, pitch, tallow. Each new flame feeds the inferno. The river becomes a mirror of fire, glowing red and gold, reflecting the falling city. People flee, carrying what they can. Bundles of clothing, silverware, cats, books wrapped in linen. Carts clog the roads, boats crowd the riverbanks. Some retreat to St. Paul's Cathedral, believing the thick stone walls will offer protection, but even that great house of worship cannot withstand what comes. The lead roof melts, dripping like wax. Flames burst through stained glass. The books of the printing shops, dozens of them packed tight into wooden stalls, feed a firestorm that brings down the mighty dome. 4 days. That is how long it lasts. 4 days of panic, smoke, and loss. When the flames finally die, aided by fire breaks and the shifting wind, the city is a scarred skeleton. Over 13,000 homes reduced to rubble, nearly 90 churches, entire markets, halls, and hospitals gone. Miraculously, few are known to have died, but the records are imperfect. Many who perished left no trace, their names lost in ash. You walk the streets now, days later. They are silent. Blackened beams jut from broken walls. The air still smells of char and damp wood. Children pick through the ruins. Priests lead quiet prayers in open fields where once stood sanctuaries. And yet, already, talk of rebuilding begins. Christopher Wren speaks of domes and boulevards. The king walks the ruins with a soft solemnity. Merchants begin calculating what was lost and what might be gained. But the city is changed, not just in form, but in memory. The Great Fire of London was not just a disaster, it was a reckoning. It exposed the fragility beneath the grand facades. It revealed how quickly comfort could vanish and how deeply the past was built on risk. And under that past lay something even older. For long before the fire, another threat had stalked these same alleys. One silent, invisible, and far more terrifying than flame. Let's walk now, down beneath the stones, to the forgotten pits of London's plague dead. The London Plague Pits, buried and forgotten. The city above is bustling again, rebuilt, reshaped. But just beneath your feet lies another London, a quieter one, a darker one. It is not marked on every map. It whispers instead through the disturbed foundations of modern buildings, the soft dips in grassy parks, the bones occasionally found during street renovations. This is plague ground. In the 17th century, and even earlier, the Black Death and its many returns forced Londoners to face the same grim decision over and over again. What do you do when there are too many dead? You are there, walking through a narrow alley in the year 1665. The air is thick, still, unnatural in its quiet. Summer presses in. A stillness hangs in the heat. You smell vinegar on the doorposts. Hear the creaking of carts carrying bodies. There are no bells, no vendors, just footsteps, just whispers. Death is everywhere, and yet invisible. The Great Plague has returned, and this time it moves fast. Whole households vanish behind closed shutters, marked with painted crosses and the haunting phrase, "Lord have mercy." If you fall ill, there is little to be done. Physicians walk the streets with long-nosed masks filled with herbs and dried petals, but their treatments, bleeding, smoking, purging, do little. The death comes fast and indiscriminately. The burial grounds fill. Soon, there are too many. At first, the parish graveyards try to keep up. Masses are held quickly, without song, but the numbers are overwhelming. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. So they begin to dig. Plague pits, wide, deep, hurriedly dug trenches, become the city's quiet solution. Often done at night, sometimes by torchlight, as if trying to bury the shame along with the bodies. You might hear it, the steady thud of shovels in the distance, or the rolling of carts over cobblestones, bringing more to add. Sometimes the coffins are simple, other times there is no time for wood. Just a cloth, a name scribbled quickly in ink, if anyone is left to write it. Clerkenwell, Aldgate, Finsbury Fields. So many names now familiar as neighborhoods, once known for the silence they held. When the pits are full, they are closed quietly. No monuments, no lasting marks. Life must go on above them. Markets are rebuilt, churches rise again, and the city forgets, until it remembers. Centuries later, construction workers dig deep footings for new basements or rail tunnels. They find them, rows of skeletons, neatly stacked, some still wrapped in shrouds, teeth clenched, fingers curled, children beside parents, and suddenly, a faint chill creeps into the present. Because these are not ancient bones, these are Londoners, people who walked the same lanes, smelled the same bread, complained about the same weather. They had names. And though they are gone, the earth remembers. Modern archaeology, especially during the 1980s and beyond, begins to uncover these silent resting places. At the Royal Mint site, Hundreds are unearthed, some buried with coins in their mouths, others with amulets or rosaries, many with nothing at all. Scientists learn much from these remains, about disease, about life expectancy, about hardship. But they also reveal something softer, something quieter. How people grieved in overwhelming times. You imagine the last quiet glance a mother gave her child as the doors closed. Or the priest who stood alone above a trench, offering prayer to a sea of silence. And as you walk these modern streets, perhaps along the banks of the Thames or beside the quiet curve of Charterhouse Square, you begin to realize you are never far from history, or from the lives it holds, buried just below the surface. But not all was sorrow in the city. Let's return now, up into the lamplit drawing rooms, the velvet-lined parlors, the homes of those who lived differently, because even as some struggled to survive, others were preparing tea with sugar, cinnamon, and wealth. Tea with the merchant class, wealth in the reeking streets. Let us rise now from the shadows and clay, from alleys steeped in ash and grief, and step carefully into another corner of the medieval and early modern city, one where the floors are swept, the windows are shuttered from the worst of the noise, and the air, for once, carries the fragrance of cloves and polished wood. You are entering the home of a prosperous London merchant in the 17th century. Outside, the city clatters on. The streets remain muddy. The cries of fishmongers and the sharp rattle of wheels on cobblestone pierce the air. But once the heavy oak door closes behind you, the chaos dulls. Inside, the room is dim but well appointed. A woolen carpet muffles your steps. The fire is low but steady. On the mantel, a brass clock ticks softly. There's a silver inkstand on the desk and a shelf lined with bound ledgers. And in the center of the table, tea. Not the bitter leaf we now know so well, taken casually in the afternoon, but a marvel, a luxury imported from distant China, carried across oceans and deserts and into the finely painted porcelain cups of the wealthy. The tea is steeped slowly, ceremoniously. A pinch of cinnamon or a spoonful of cane sugar is added, also imported, also expensive. The sugar, you note, comes from plantations far away, a luxury built upon labor many in this room will never see. You sit back and listen. The merchant speaks of shipments delayed at the docks, of peppercorns from the Indies, wool exports to the Low Countries, a letter from Amsterdam sealed in red wax. His profits are strong. His sons are at school. His daughters are learning French. There's a sharpness to his words, but a comfort in his voice. He has survived the plague, the fire, the unrest. He has built something sturdy. Around him, his wife oversees the household. Linen pressed, servants accounted for, spices locked in their tiny wooden chests. She carries herself with a practiced ease. Her hands are adorned with gold rings, her sleeves trimmed with lace. It's not the nobility, but it is wealth, and comfort, and certainty of a kind. They do not toil in the alleys. They do not empty chamber pots into the street. They rise late, dine on roasted meats, attend church in fine pews, and entertain neighbors with music and Madeira. And yet, even here, life is not without its constraints. The house must always be guarded against fire. Thieves are a constant worry. The water must be fetched or purchased. Clean clothing is hard won. Illness still lurks, no respecter of wealth or velvet. But for now, the candlelight flickers gently against the window panes. A daughter practices her clavichord in the corner, halting, sweet notes drifting into the evening air. The merchant sighs and sips his tea. A fire pops quietly in the hearth. Outside, a bell tolls the hour. And life continues, somewhere between comfort and caution. A world apart from the plague pits, the tanning yards, and the clamor of street criers, but still bound to the same city, the same river, the same fragile rhythms of breath and time. Let us linger here just a while longer, before returning to the present. Closing reflection, beneath the stone and smoke. And now, gently, the past begins to fade. The shutters are closed, the fire's banked, the carts are gone from the street. You leave the city behind. Its clamor, its closeness, its mingled scents of hearth smoke and tannin, of bread and rot and horseshoe sparks. It was a place of contradictions, A place where cobblers shared walls with scribes, where death visited quietly in the night, where fortunes were made in pepper, or soap or sailcloth, while just beyond the window, someone else coughed behind a locked door. It was not a place you'd last long, perhaps, but it was real, lived in, layered in ash and stone and memory. And though it is gone now, much of it lingers. In the curve of a crooked lane, in the damp air after rain, in the place names, the church towers, the whispered ghosts beneath subway tunnels. You breathe deeply. You are here again, in your bed, in this time, in this warmth, far from chamber pots and fire hooks, far from plague and parchment. Let the city sleep now. Let its bells fade. And let your thoughts drift as gently as candle smoke into stillness. Good night. The palace that never slept, settle in. Let your breath slow. The world is quiet now. And as your eyes grow heavier, allow yourself to drift, not into dreams just yet, but into the corridors of another time. Imagine waking in the still hours before dawn, not to birdsong or gentle light, but to the cold tug of duty. The candle is stubby. Your limbs are stiff from a shared straw mattress. The air, already thick with the scent of wax, chamber pots, and sweat, reminds you, you're not in your own bed. You are in Versailles, not as a noble, not as a guest of the king, but as one of the many invisible hands that kept the palace breathing, always just beneath the surface, never truly at rest. Versailles, the glittering marvel of 17th century France, is often remembered for its marble halls, golden trim, and endless mirrors. But beneath the powdered beauty and silk-draped grandeur ran a hidden machinery, a world of servants, attendants, and workers whose lives bore little resemblance to the luxury they maintained. In tonight's story, we'll spend time behind the walls and beneath the chandeliers. We'll follow the rhythm of days filled with protocol and punishment, scandal and spectacle. You'll come to know the queen in her most private hours. You'll witness a scandal that nearly toppled a throne. And you'll sit quietly in the company of a noble as he begins his lavish morning. But first, let us begin where the sun rises earliest, and with those who must always rise before it. Why being a servant in Versailles was a nightmare. The palace looms, all gold leaf and endless glass. From a distance, it sparkles beneath the early sun. But closer, inside the servant quarters, the day begins not with splendor, but with sore feet and aching backs. Imagine yourself as one of the king's domestic staff. Perhaps you are a scullion or a chambermaid, a valet if you're lucky. The position came not only with low pay and long hours, but an overwhelming sense of hierarchy. Every step, every gesture, every sentence had its place. And yours was always below someone else's. You sleep in a room with 3 or 4 others, on straw bedding, often infested with lice. The air is never quite fresh. You share space not just with your colleagues, but with rodents, damp clothing, and the constant scurry of palace life. By 4 in the morning, you're already moving, cleaning ashes from hearths, polishing silver, drawing lukewarm water, if you're fortunate. Versailles had plumbing of a kind, but not for you. Your tasks were endless and exacting, and everything was governed by protocol. You didn't simply walk into a room. You entered when called. You didn't speak unless spoken to. You bowed, curtsied, paused, and waited, even to place a napkin or light a candle. The king's waking, for instance, his lever, was a ceremony in itself, a public event where dozens of nobles and officials would gather to watch His Majesty rise. As a servant, your job might be to prepare his shirt, warmed by the fire, but you'd pass it to a noble, who passed it to another, before it reached the king's back. Hierarchy extended even to helping someone get dressed. And meals. Grand, lavish, ritualistic. But for you it was hauling heavy trays, avoiding eye contact, knowing that a dropped fork could result in demotion, or worse, disgrace. Cleanliness was selective. Versailles sparkled, but the odor could be overwhelming. With thousands inside its walls, chamber pots were everywhere. Some nobles refused to use the privies at all, preferring corners or stairwells. Guess who cleaned it? Still, despite the filth and pressure, Many servants stayed for years. It was work. It was predictable. And sometimes it offered a glimpse into power, a closeness to wealth that might rub off, however faintly. Some servants rose through the ranks. Others found quiet pride in their tasks. A well-swept hearth, a perfectly folded towel, a task done before it was asked for. But most lived in the margins, anonymous, exhausted, and always alert. Because at Versailles, to serve was to vanish, to be invisible, but never idle. As the day progresses and the palace stirs into full motion, your work is far from over. There are wigs to be powdered, gowns to be stitched, floors to be scrubbed again and again, and all the while, music drifts faintly through the halls, a harpsichord in the distance, footsteps above your head, the rustle of silk and whispered gossip. You breathe deeply. The scent of beeswax polish and old stone surrounds you. This is life at Versailles, for those behind the scenes. An endless waltz of labor, ritual, and quiet obedience. A rhythm you did not choose, but one you follow, day after day. And now as the halls begin to bustle with dignitaries and courtiers, let us step quietly away from the broom and the larder. There is another story to hear, a quieter one. One that unfolds not in the scullery, but behind the heavy curtains of the Queen's chambers. When you're ready, we'll slip through that velvet doorway together. Marie Antoinette, the unseen hours of a doomed queen. The morning light filters through embroidered drapes, casting soft patterns onto the polished floor. It is quiet in the Queen's chambers, calm, measured, and scented faintly of rose water and starch. Marie Antoinette is not yet awake, but preparations have already begun. Unlike the clamor of the servant quarters or the booming rituals of the king's liver, the Queen's world is gentler, more insulated, though no less suffocating. Behind the silks and powders, behind the carefully painted smile, there existed a life that was intensely choreographed, relentlessly observed, and deeply misunderstood. Imagine yourself as one of her femmes de chambre, the attendants who navigated the maze of protocol to tend to her most intimate routines. You know the Queen's schedule not by clock, but by rhythm. This delicate choreography of dressing, praying, eating, appearing, always appearing. Marie Antoinette, once the child of a powerful Austrian empress, came to France at just 14, a foreigner in Versailles, a girl expected to become a symbol of unity, opulence, and fertility. And from the very beginning, every hour of her life belonged to others. Her morning began not with solitude, but with ritual. The toilette de la reine, her public dressing ceremony, was less about hygiene and more about hierarchy. In the soft light of her chambers, up to a dozen women might enter, some to assist, others merely to observe. If you were the highest-ranking noblewoman present, you handed the Queen her shift. But if a duchess entered moments later, she'd take over. Then another, each waiting her turn to lift the linen, to offer the sleeve, to clasp the bodice. Marie Antoinette stood quietly through it all, half-dressed, often cold, sometimes humiliated by the bureaucracy of rank. She may have longed for simplicity, but in Versailles, simplicity was subversion. After dressing came prayer, a light breakfast, letters written with careful diplomacy, then walks through manicured gardens, or more often, the performance of being seen in them, and then hours of appearances. She would sit in salons, surrounded by murmuring courtiers. She would attend theatrical performances, play cards she did not always enjoy, smile through polite conversations that masked rumors and calculations. Everything was ritual. Everything had meaning. But it was in the private hours, when the doors closed and the courtiers retreated, that a different Marie emerged. At her estate, the Petit Trianon, built just for her, she escaped the crush of protocol. There she could wear simpler gowns. There she could tend to flowers, read books, laugh with close companions. And yet, even this space was observed. Her critics saw the Queen's solitude as arrogance, her desire for calm as indulgence. Whispers grew. She loved music. She played the harp. She adored her children and doted on them with a mother's fierce tenderness. But that too became ammunition. Every affection she showed was scrutinized. Was she too Austrian? Too detached from France? Too cold? Too warm? A queen could not simply be a woman, not in Versailles. Years passed. France changed. The palace walls grew colder. Her husband, King Louis XVI, became increasingly uncertain in his rule. Bread grew scarce in the cities, and in the salons, the laughter grew sharper, tinged with something sour. The queen's image, once celebrated, began to curdle. Caricatures painted her as frivolous, wasteful, even cruel. The infamous phrase, "Let them eat cake," though never actually spoken by her, echoed through the streets. A whisper became a roar. And yet, in her chambers, she still performed the same rituals, still bowed to the rhythms of the court. Even as the revolution approached, Versailles remained unchanged. The corridors still echoed with footfall. The powdered wigs were still applied. The candles still lit. But Marie Antoinette began to retreat inward. Her letters became more strained. Her solitude deepened. At night she walked the gardens alone, her thoughts heavy. She feared for her children, for her country, for herself. And then, the gates of Versailles opened, not for nobility, but for a mob. She would never return to the quiet chambers of her youth. The silk-lined days gave way to shadows, cold stone, and locked doors. But here, in this moment, we remember her not as the doomed queen on the scaffold, but as the woman behind the curtain, rising with the sun, submitting to hands that powdered her hair, longing for moments of stillness in a life where every hour was claimed. You can almost hear the rustle of her gown, the soft clink of porcelain, the breath before she smiles, the rhythm of her life, even now, lingers. Let us now step carefully from her chamber and deeper into Versailles. Not through its salons or galleries, but beneath the surface, where stories sleep in the soil. There we'll find a scandal, a mystery, a moment of deception that helped spark a revolution. When you're ready, we'll unfold the story of the diamond necklace. The affair of the diamond necklace, a scandal that sparked revolt. The air beneath Versailles was always cooler, quiet, thick with the hush of secrets and shadowed conversations. Though the palace above glowed with chandeliers and gilded mirrors, its foundations carried another rhythm, a subtler beat of deception, ambition, and fragile reputations. This is where the story of the diamond necklace truly begins, not in a jeweler's workshop, nor in the queen's dressing room, but in the in-between spaces of power, the spaces where influence is bartered quietly, and ruin slips in without warning. The necklace itself was extraordinary. Imagine it, a chain of nearly 650 diamonds, each hand-cut and precisely set. A river of light, cascading down from neck to waist, lavish beyond comprehension, even for Versailles. It had been commissioned decades earlier by King Louis XV for his mistress, Madame du Barry, but she never wore it. He died before it was completed, and so the necklace sat, untouched, unsold. Too grand for ordinary royalty, too expensive for nearly anyone to purchase outright. It shimmered, unused, waiting, until Jeanne de la Motte entered the scene. Jeanne was born into nobility, but poverty clung to her like a second skin. She had the name, the manner, the ambition, but not the wealth. And in a world like Versailles, that imbalance was suffocating. Jeanne had married a soldier, but her true talent lay in performance. She knew how to tell a story, how to charm a listener, how to see a weakness and gently press. And she had her eye on a prize that was far beyond rubies or gowns or titles. She wanted influence. Her target was Cardinal de Rohan. He was a powerful cleric, well-connected, and most importantly, desperate to regain the queen's favor. He believed Marie Antoinette despised him, and he longed for reconciliation. Jeanne knew this, and she wove her plan accordingly. She told the cardinal that she was close to the queen, that she had the queen's ear, that she could arrange secret correspondences, that perhaps, if he helped arrange the purchase of the long-forgotten necklace, he would be rewarded with royal favor. And so the notes began. Letters, sweet and formal, passed quietly between Jeanne and the cardinal. The writing mimicked Marie Antoinette's hand. The tone matched her known voice, and Cardinal de Rohan, eager to believe, saw what he wanted to see. There was even a meeting. In the gardens of Versailles, under moonlight, a woman stepped forward, pale and powdered, dressed like a queen. She handed him a rose, whispered words of forgiveness, promised that all would be well. She was an actress, paid by Jean. The cardinal did not know. Soon after, the necklace was purchased in the queen's name, without her knowledge, and just as quickly it disappeared. Jean and her accomplices dismantled it, stone by stone, and sold the diamonds across Europe. But secrets in Versailles, like perfume in the summer heat, do not stay hidden. The jeweler, seeking payment, contacted the queen directly. Confusion gave way to anger, and the whole twisted narrative spilled into the open. Now imagine this moment. Versailles, usually cloaked in ceremony and quiet rivalry, suddenly vibrating with scandal. The queen, already viewed by the public with suspicion, was dragged deeper into disgrace. Though she had no part in the plot, the affair fed the image of a frivolous, decadent court. The trial was public. Jean insisted she acted on behalf of the queen. The cardinal, once a man of the cloth, stood humiliated before the Parlement of Paris. And the necklace, once a dazzling cascade of light, was gone. Marie Antoinette was not found guilty, but in the eyes of the people, she had already been judged. The diamond necklace, meant to dazzle, had instead illuminated the rot beneath the gold leaf. The affair revealed more than a clever fraud. It exposed the fragility of trust in the monarchy, the cracks in the facade of royalty, the sense that beneath all the ritual, Versailles was crumbling under its own illusions. And so, the queen who longed for simplicity became an emblem of excess. The cardinal who sought favor became a fool, and Jeanne, the desperate noblewoman, faded into exile, leaving behind a court forever changed. Scandal in Versailles did not end with whispers. It lingered, it festered, it spread like fire. And speaking of fire, let us turn now to the upper crust of court life, to powdered wigs and satins, to the carefully orchestrated mornings of the privileged. What did it look like to awaken not as a servant or a queen, but as a nobleman? When you're ready, we'll rise with the aristocracy and slip into the perfumed world of the morning toilette. A noble's morning routine, perfume, courtiers, and privilege. Imagine you are drifting awake in a grand bed. The canopy overhead is embroidered in gold thread. Pale light spills gently through tall windows, and somewhere in the distance, birdsong mingles with the quiet sweep of a servant's broom. The sheets are crisp linen, the air, faintly scented, perhaps with orange blossom water or the trace of lavender from yesterday. Sachets tucked in your cuffs. It is morning at Versailles. And you are a nobleman. Not royalty, no, but titled and important enough that your rising is no private affair. At court, even waking is a performance. It begins slowly. A valet enters, steps soft against the polished parquet floor. He offers a bow, not too deep, not too rushed, and announces the hour. He draws back the curtains. Light spills across the ornate chamber. The day has begun. You do not rise at once. That would be improper. A nobleman eases into the day through ritual. The grand lever, they call it, the great rising. A formal sequence attended by an audience of lesser courtiers, ambitious visitors and servants eager to gain favor through small, silent gestures. First, the basin of water, not for a full bath, but to dab at the face, the neck, the hands. Full bathing was rare and often discouraged. Cleanliness was achieved through scent, through linens changed often, and an impressive arsenal of powders and oils. A barber smooths your cheeks with a cloth and prepares a razor. The soap smells faintly of sandalwood. He works with practiced calm, murmuring little as he trims the beard or shaves it clean depending on the fashion of the week. Next, the dressing. Clothing is not chosen in haste. It is a deliberate act of status. Stockings, silk of course, are rolled carefully over your legs. Shoes, polished and buckled, may bear small heels dyed red to signal proximity to the king. Breeches are fastened, shirt pulled tight and ruffled just so. Waistcoat, then coat, heavily embroidered, perhaps with silver thread or designs of acorns and fleur-de-lis. A sword is belted on, not for battle but for dignity. The perruquier, the wig maker, steps in with your powdered wig. Tall, curled and perfumed. It rests high and formal on your head, and he dusts it with a soft puff of rice powder. The scent? A blend of orris root, musk, and something faintly floral. Lilac, perhaps. All the while, attendants murmur greetings. Some hand you gloves, others present letters, or quietly ask for favors. A cousin wants a marriage arranged. A nephew seeks a military commission. A friend's friend hopes for a place in the king's household. Your nod carries weight. Your silence even more. Now dressed, perfumed, and powdered, you descend into the wider palace. The walls echo with footsteps, soft slippers and hard heels. You pass courtiers in bright silks, ladies whispering behind fans, officials clasping scrolls to their chest. Breakfast is small but refined. You sit with others of your rank. A slice of bread with honey, a glass of watered wine, perhaps a bit of ham or fruit if the kitchen sent it early. Conversation is polite, careful, often veiled. The day unfolds in layers of ceremony. You may attend a hunting party or promenade through the gardens, nodding to acquaintances in the shade of clipped hedges. There are letters to send, alliances to manage, gossip to absorb. A single look exchanged across the hall of mirrors might mean far more than a dozen spoken words. You might offer a bow to the king, if invited to his public meals. But be careful. Bow too low, and you risk seeming desperate. Too shallow, and you risk disrespect. The court is not a place of swords and blood. It is a place of glances, gestures, and rules so intricate that a misplaced comment can mean disgrace. And so your days follow a rhythm, laced with rituals both comforting and exhausting. Perfume masks the lack of bathing. Laughter hides anxiety. And behind every embroidered waistcoat is a heart beating fast with ambition. Or fear. But there is comfort too. Your chamber is warm in winter. Your sheets are laundered. You dine on veal with truffles, or duck glazed in fruit. You hold a title. You are seen. Even if you must never, ever show your weariness. As the day fades, candles are lit in candelabras of crystal and brass. Shadows stretch across the gilded walls. Another day of performance draws to a close, and at last, you return to your rooms. The wig is removed, the coat unfastened. Your valet washes your hands once more. You settle into the same grand bed where you began. The same soft sheets, the same pale light dimmed now to darkness. You have survived another day at Versailles. And now, as the court quiets and the corridors hush, so too can we draw this journey to a close. Let us end with a final reflection, one that settles gently like dust on velvet. Gilded lives, shadowed truths. So now, as the candles of Versailles burn low in our imagination, and the heavy velvet curtains are drawn across our shared glimpse of history, let us ease back and breathe. We have wandered through alleyways thick with smoke and sweat, stood beside the weary servants in silk-trimmed shadows, followed queens through hollow rituals, traced scandals that whispered revolt, and risen, if only for a moment, with powdered nobility wrapped in quiet vanity. What do we carry with us? Perhaps a softened sense of time. A reminder that beneath the shimmer of chandeliers and the gleam of marble floors, there pulsed ordinary lives, tired feet, aching backs, shallow breaths behind corsets and collars. Beneath the gold, a constant struggle. It is easy to romanticize the past, to imagine lace and harpsichords, masquerades and moonlit balls. But behind the spectacle, the pageantry, the perfume, there was hardship, there was hunger, there was longing. Versailles, grand as it was, could not escape the weight of its own perfection. And yet, there was also comfort in its rhythm, a kind of peace in the predictability of rituals, the soft brush of powder each morning, the scent of lavender on one's cuffs, the delicate tap of heeled shoes on polished stone. For some, that was enough. And for us now, hundreds of years later, wrapped not in brocade, but perhaps in the quiet folds of a blanket, the low hum of nighttime stillness around us, there is something gently reassuring in their lives, something slow, measured, repetitive in a way that soothes. Imagine once more that you are in a chamber of your own, not grand perhaps, but safe, a place where no chamberlain waits, where you are not watched as you sleep, or whispered about behind closed doors. The world beyond the window may still be turning, still changing, but in this moment, you are at rest. The past has spoken softly, the stories have folded themselves neatly away, and now you can close your eyes, letting the echoes of powdered footsteps and gilded laughter slip into quiet. Let the rhythm of their lives dissolve into stillness. Sleep well, and good night. Settle in. Let your shoulders ease back and your breath soften as we travel, not far and yet impossibly far, into a world shadowed by chimneys, wrapped in fog, and shaped by soot. Tonight we're going to walk through the narrow alleys and parlors of Victorian London, a city of towering ambition and aching inequality, where fortunes were made, yes, but more often they were scraped at, one soiled coin at a time. This is not a tale of opulence, though we will eventually brush up against velvet and bone china. No, this journey begins in the slums, in the places where coal dust blackened every windowsill, where the air clung to you with a sour, damp kiss, where children coughed and played in the same muddy lane. We will follow a mother preparing a meal she cannot afford. We will listen to the tired clink of tools in a matchstick factory. We will stand beside the great, slow-moving Thames and try not to breathe too deeply. And finally, we will climb the creaking staircase of a grand townhouse to sip tea among those who floated high above it all. But for now, I'd like you to picture something small. A cracked ceramic mug. Inside, a splash of gin and a scrap of bread, softened just enough for a child with loose teeth to chew. Outside the window, the thump of boots on wet cobbles and the hiss of steam from a nearby laundry. This is where we begin. Life in a Victorian slum was worse than you think. Imagine yourself on a narrow street in Whitechapel, just as dawn begins to bleed through the London fog. The light is dull, filtered through soot and chimney smoke. It paints everything in gray. The buildings rise close together, leaning inward like tired men. They are brick mostly, but aged and damp, streaked with old rain and new filth. Ivy doesn't grow here, only mildew. The cobblestones beneath your feet are slick with last night as refuse, spilled slop from chamber pots, ash from stoves, and the churned-up mess of too many boots treading the same path. The scent is sharp, like coal smoke laced with rot. It clings to the back of your throat, faint but inescapable. Doors here are rarely locked. There's not much to steal, and besides, you wouldn't want to linger inside. A single room might house 6 or 7 people, sometimes more. A mother wakes on a straw-stuffed mattress. Her youngest is beside her, curled in the crook of her arm, still coughing gently in sleep. Across the room, her eldest daughter, 9 years old perhaps, is already tying a ragged shawl around her shoulders, preparing to leave for the match factory. The mattress smells of old sweat and cold damp. There is no privacy, only corners. The floor is bare wood, soft with age and moisture, and there is a small stove in the corner, rust-licked and tired. On it, a pot of something thin and gray. Gruel if they have oats. Boiled scraps, if not. There is no running water, no toilet either. A narrow alley behind the building contains what was once a shared privy. Brick walls, a door hanging crookedly, and inside a shallow pit choked with lime and waste. It is not emptied often. At night, many simply use chamber pots, or don't use anything at all. The smell hovers everywhere, like another tenant. You stop noticing it after a while. The streets begin to fill as the city wakes. Men in soot-streaked coats shuffle toward factories and docks. Women lean from windows to hang washing, though the air itself stains more than it cleans. Children are everywhere. Some run errands, some beg. Some slip through fences into the backs of shops looking for crumbs. By law, children under 9 were not to work, but the law is a faraway thing. A girl of 7 might work a sewing machine for 10 hours. A boy of 8 might carry coal until his fingers become hard and sooty and small for his age. They learn quickly to be silent, to be useful. The diet of a slum dweller is a small thing. Bread mostly, cheap and often stale. Sometimes potatoes, if there's a bit of money. If the mother can stretch a penny, there might be dripping, a kind of meat fat spread on bread, eaten cold. Milk is a luxury. Eggs, rare. The body learns to live on less. For many, gin replaces meals. It's not hard to find. Sold in shops, ladled from barrels, sweetened slightly to blunt the edge. Women drink it to quiet hunger. Men drink it to forget. It's said a mother might give her child a thimble of gin to help them sleep. Sometimes even the children ask for it by name. And still, there is a rhythm to life here. A mother scrubs laundry until her hands bleed, hanging it on ropes between windows. A boy sells matches on a corner, his voice dull with repetition. A girl pins together cuffs in a dimly lit workshop, her back aching, her fingertips raw. It is not glamour. It is not tragedy either, not in the way stories like to tell it. It is simply life, lived in inches, in coin, in crumbs. The slums pulse with a quiet persistence. People survive. They joke when they can. They fall in love occasionally. They sing, often badly, but with heart. They carry on. Now, as we leave these alleys behind, let your breath deepen. Let the cobblestones fall away. Let the fog drift. And let us turn toward another kind of fire, one not fueled by coal or hunger. In our next chapter, we'll step into the sulfur-scented world of factory girls and meet those who quietly dared to strike. The Matchstick Girls strike. Sulfur and sisterhood. The morning begins long before the sun rises over Bow. In a cramped flat above a bakery that never truly sleeps, a young girl stirs beneath a threadbare blanket. Her fingers twitch before her eyes even open, already remembering the motion of work. She is 15, maybe 16, or perhaps younger. It's hard to say. Years blend together in a life measured more by shifts than by seasons. She rises quietly, slipping from the mattress without waking her younger siblings. Her mother is already in the corner, stirring weak tea. No words are spoken. There is little to say. Soon she is on the street, her feet carrying her down to Fairfield Road, toward the match factory. The Bryant and May Match Factory looms over the East End like a fortress of industry. Red brick walls stretch high and long, interrupted by tall, narrow windows, behind which flicker the pale lights of early machinery. Inside, the air is thick, sour with the scent of phosphorus, sharp enough to sting the nose and settle in the lungs. This isn't the soft warmth of a wood fire. This is chemical. This is sulfur. It seeps into everything, into clothing, into hair, into skin. This is the domain of the match girls. They are nimble-fingered, mostly young, many still children. They sit at long tables with boxes and trays, dipping matchsticks into white phosphorus paste, pressing, drying, sorting. The work is repetitive, numbing, but it demands precision. A single slip could mean a spark, a burn, a fire. The paste they handle, day after day, carries a quiet menace. White phosphorus is luminous. It glows faintly in the dark, and deadly. Prolonged exposure to it leads to a disease called phossy jaw. The lower jaw swells, becomes soft, discolors. Eventually it decays, rotting from the inside out. The pain is slow, the smell unmistakable. There is no real treatment. The foremen do not speak of this, nor do the managers, nor the owners. And so the girls laugh when they can. They whisper jokes behind kerchiefs tied tight across their faces. They sing softly as they work, voices weaving in and out like threads. They braid each other's hair during breaks. Sometimes they hum lullabies, songs remembered from childhood or borrowed from the streets. They are children carrying matches, children playing near fire, but they are careful and quiet and endlessly brave. Wages are poor. 1 or 2 shillings a week, often docked for small infractions, talking, arriving a minute late, damaging a box, losing a stick. Meals are taken on the same benches where the phosphorus is handled. There is no washroom, no sink. Fingers stained with chemicals wrap around slices of bread. Some try to eat without touching the crust. Most don't bother. And then, in 1888, something flickers. A journalist, Annie Besant, publishes an article. She had seen the factory, spoken with the girls, heard their stories. Her words burn hotter than any match. Public sympathy swells. Letters are written. Questions are raised. And suddenly, something unthinkable happens. The girls walk out, not all at once, not with banners or speeches, but steadily, surely, one by one, then in groups. Over 1,400 girls refuse to work. The strike is not perfect, it is not tidy, but it is bold. These were girls told they had no voice, told their suffering was normal, told they were replaceable. But for the first time, they are heard. They form a committee. They draft demands, safer conditions, fair pay, dignity. They speak, not just for themselves, but for each other. And slowly, the pressure builds. Newspapers cover the story. Politicians are forced to notice. Eventually, the company relents, at least partially. Fines are reduced. Conditions slowly begin to improve. The strike does not fix everything, but it cracks the silence. It signals that even the smallest spark can spread. And the match girls? They return to work. But they are changed. Now they know their strength. They have tasted solidarity. They have learned that even in a world that turns a blind eye to the poor, voices can be lifted, and sometimes answered. Let your mind rest now. The factory fades. The smell of phosphorus grows faint. And in its place, something else rises. Something more curious. Not fire, not smoke, but a strange letter, a forged signature, and a necklace that never should have been. The trial of the century, the necklace that shook the crown. The halls of power are rarely quiet, but in 1785, even Versailles seemed to hold its breath. Imagine, if you will, a palace drenched in golden light, its mirrors catching every flicker of candle flame, its corridors echoing with whispers instead of laughter. Outside, the gardens were clipped and symmetrical. But inside, the order of appearances barely concealed the disorder of trust. This is the story of a necklace. But more than that, it is a story of illusion, of ambition, and of how scandal, when finely cut, can reflect far more than just the faces it touches. It begins with a necklace so extravagant, so excessive it almost defies belief. Crafted by the royal jewelers Beumer and Bassange, it was meant for Madame de Barry, the mistress of the previous king. But with Louis XV's death, the necklace lingered unsold. Years passed, and its opulence became a burden. Imagine thousands of diamonds, carefully set to rest upon a single neck, valued at over 1.6 million livres, a fortune in stone. No one wanted it. Not even Marie Antoinette. The Queen, already aware of her precarious position in the public eye, declined it more than once. It was too lavish, even for Versailles. But into this glittering vacuum stepped Jeanne de la Motte. A minor noblewoman by birth, Jeanne possessed neither great wealth nor courtly favor. What she did have, however, was a powerful imagination and a willingness to play many roles. She claimed to be descended from the Valois, an ancient line of kings, and used that tale to enter society's fringes. It was there she met Cardinal de Rohan, a man eager to return to royal favor after years of falling from grace. Jeanne promised him access. She claimed, falsely, that she was on good terms with the Queen. She told him Marie Antoinette wanted to reconcile, that the Queen missed his company, that she trusted Jeanne as a confidant, and Rohan, desperate to believe, did. The plot deepened. Letters were forged, sweet, hesitant notes penned in the Queen's supposed hand. They dripped with affection and hinted at forgiveness. The Cardinal was enchanted. And then came the request. The Queen, Jeanne said, wished to acquire the infamous necklace, but discreetly, through an intermediary. Could Rohan help? He agreed, arranging to purchase the necklace on her behalf, signing a contract, and handing it over to Jeanne, who promptly vanished with the diamonds. When the deception came to light, it was too late. The Queen was furious. Rohan was arrested in public view. Jeanne was caught, imprisoned, and eventually escaped. The necklace? Dismantled. Its stones scattered across Europe, vanishing into pockets, rings, and brooches. But the true damage was far less tangible. Though Marie Antoinette had been innocent, entirely unaware, the public believed otherwise. Whispers swirled, pamphlets proliferated. In the salons and cafes of Paris, people clucked their tongues and smiled knowingly. She says she never wanted the necklace, they muttered. But of course she did. The Queen became a symbol of excess, of deception, of coldness cloaked in silk. Even truth couldn't dislodge the image once the story had taken root. The trial that followed, held not in a back chamber but in the Parliament of Paris, was a spectacle. Nobles leaned forward, writers scribbled, the city watched, wide-eyed. Cardinal de Rohan was acquitted. So too was the court forger. But Jean was condemned, not only by the court, but by the ink of countless broadsheets. Marie Antoinette, though untouched by the law, was not spared by the people. A necklace never worn had wrapped itself around her image, and it would never quite be undone. Now close your eyes for a moment. Let the candlelight fade. Let the sound of echoing footsteps in Versailles grow distant. The clink of diamonds has ceased. The courtroom has emptied. The queen retreats behind velvet. A noble's morning routine, perfume, courtiers, and privilege. The bells of Versailles do not chime loudly. They don't need to. Here, life moves not to the sound of clocks or urgency, but to the rhythm of ceremony. It is morning, though time in the palace is a suggestion rather than a schedule. The sun filters through tall windows, its rays carefully caught and scattered by chandeliers and gilded cornices. Outside, the fountains murmur quietly to clipped box hedges. Inside, a nobleman begins his day. Not abruptly, not with alarms or haste, but with ritual. Imagine yourself in a private chamber, not overly large but refined. A fireplace, its embers carefully maintained by an attending valet. A dressing table polished to perfection, its surface hosting ivory-handled brushes, silver snuff boxes, and delicate flacons of imported perfume. You lie not on a simple bed, but a lit à la duchesse, draped in embroidered silks, its canopy etched with family crests. Your nightshirt is linen, your slippers velvet, and as your eyes open, you are not alone. The first to greet you is your valet de chambre, not a servant, but a craftsman of comfort. He helps you sit up, offers warm water in a shallow porcelain basin, and holds a freshly laundered cloth, folded just so. Your first act of the day? Not prayer, nor toil. It is to be seen. A knock. Another valet enters, then another. A chamberlain, a distant cousin, a favored courtier. Your door is open because the act of rising is not private. It is performance. The king's lever, his ceremonial rising, may be better known, but nobles mimic this daily theater. Your toilette is observed, even attended. They note how you sit, how you yawn, how you sip the watered wine offered in a crystal goblet. And so begins the ritual. The valet presents two waistcoats, one pale green, embroidered with vine leaves, the other a dusky rose, edged in silver braid. You lift a hand, barely indicating your choice. Stockings are pulled, carefully, with the heel creased just so. Breeches fastened with a sigh of satin. Shoes slipped on, buckled with soft clicks. A shirt ruffled at the cuffs, then the waistcoat, snug but unhurried. And then the powdering. You lean back. A cloth is draped over your shoulders. Your valet dips a puff into a fine white powder, scented faintly with lavender and orris root. He taps it gently into your hair. The room is quiet, save for the hush of powder settling. A few sneezes are muffled behind gloved hands. This isn't cleanliness. It's appearance. Your real bath might come once a week, if that. Instead, perfume becomes armor. The air is thick with bergamot and ambergris, masking the realities of a world without plumbing. Now fully dressed, you rise. Slowly, deliberately. You greet those who've waited. A polite nod to a marquis. A murmured inquiry to your cousin about her headache. Perhaps even a small joke, dry, tasteful, offered as you accept your walking stick. Your day has not begun. Not really, but the performance of beginning, that is complete. And now, it's time to be seen elsewhere. You make your way to the breakfast salon, not hurried. The halls are long, but your stride is measured. You nod at tapestries, exchange glances with passing dukes. Behind you, a servant carries your snuff box and glove case. You take a light breakfast, coffee imported from Arabia, served with milk from cows kept behind the orangery, a slice of warm brioche, perhaps a spoonful of orange marmalade brought from the colonies. Every item on the table speaks of distance, of power, of unseen labor. And yet for you, it is simply morning. Later, you may attend a royal hunt, where deer are driven into view by peasants and dispatched from horseback with hardly a stain, or perhaps a salon, where you will exchange polished opinions on Voltaire and the merits of Rousseau, sipping chocolate as servants replenish coals. But even now, seated before your breakfast, you are enacting a role. To be noble in Versailles is not to toil, but to appear. It is not to move quickly, but to glide, not to hunger, but to taste. And so you do. As the scene fades, imagine the sun climbing higher. The courtiers depart, fanning out through echoing halls. The breakfast tray is cleared. The perfume settles into your cuffs. And you are left, still. Not quite alone, not quite at ease. Because the palace, with all its gold and mirrors, never truly rests. Even leisure is watched. Even privacy is porous. And as the revolution looms on the horizon, just a whisper, not yet thunder, the nobleman sips his chocolate and debates politics as though nothing could ever change. Because here, within these walls, it has always been morning. And now, dear listener, we gently close the final door on Versailles. The powdered wigs have settled. The diamonds are scattered. The queen is gone. The nobles are silent. And you are safe, warm, and far from it all. Let us drift now, away from ceremony, away from scandal, away from the uneasy elegance of that golden world. Sleep well, traveler of time. You've wandered through firelit chambers and powdered corridors, and the world outside your own is quiet once again. Good night. As the world outside your window softens into evening, and the weight of the day begins to lift from your shoulders, I invite you now to step away from the present. Let the sounds around you blur. Let the air become still. Together we will journey back, far back, to another place. Another rhythm. Another set of lives moving beneath an unfamiliar sky. Imagine, if you will, a landscape shaped by both blade and brush, where silence can mean honor, where loyalty binds tighter than blood, and where status is not always what it seems. This is feudal Japan, but not the version of it written with bold strokes, not the theater of duels or the clash of banners. Tonight we linger in the margins, in the rice paddies, in the smoky kitchens, in the tatami-floored rooms where real lives unfolded, quietly. Our story begins not with a mighty warrior, but with a contradiction. Let's begin with those who walk the line between sword and soil. Segment 1. Why being a samurai peasant was a living contradiction. It is early morning in the countryside of Tokugawa, Japan. A fine mist clings to the slopes of low green hills. The rice fields stretch outward, glistening with dew, quiet except for the occasional soft cry of a heron wading near the levees. A man steps out of his home, a simple wooden structure, its thatched roof patched here and there, its sliding doors worn from use. His clothes are not rich, but his posture is upright. A topknot marks his class. At his side, no sword, only a sickle. This is a goshi, a rural samurai. His title commands a sliver of respect. His life, however, is bound by earth. You see, in the long stillness of the Tokugawa shogunate, not all samurai lived as noble warriors. Some, especially those far from castle towns, became something else, something curious, part farmer, part soldier, respected by some, looked down on by others. Each day he rises with the sun, not to duel or meditate, but to tend to rice. The crop is not merely his sustenance, it is his duty, his burden, and his tax. He owes grain to the local magistrate, grain to the daimyo, grain to the state, and what is left, he keeps, if he is lucky. As the mist begins to lift, he moves through his paddy barefoot, the mud cool against his skin. He works silently, rhythmically. The work is not glorious, it is backbreaking, yet he does not complain. Complaints bring attention. Attention brings scrutiny. His family helps, his wife wrapping rice seedlings with calloused fingers, his eldest son driving the oxen that pull a creaking plow. They wear rough cotton, they eat barley and miso, and yet, in records and rolls, this man is samurai. In town, he carries a short sword, not a katana, not a symbol of power, but enough to identify his status. Yet he cannot afford the full pair, nor the fine robes, nor the leisure that castle samurai enjoy. Still, when summoned, he must serve. During times of conflict, he is expected to fight, even if his armor is borrowed and his training sparse. When not at war, which is often, he is expected to maintain dignity, to observe rituals, and to keep order among those considered beneath him. But what does it mean to be above others when you toil beside them? At festival days, he bows to higher samurai and receives shallow nods in return. At tax season, he must petition the local official with careful deference. His sword may offer pride, but it does not shield him from debt. And in the eyes of his neighbors, he is both respected and resented, because the line between peasant and warrior is thinner than ink on rice paper. In the evenings, his family gathers inside their narrow home. The floor creaks softly beneath woven mats. A pot of soup simmers over a hearth set into the floor, its broth rich with wild greens but little meat. His wife mends a robe. His children grind soybeans. He watches the flame and thinks not of glory, but of the harvest, of taxes, of next season's storms. His sword rests nearby, not in a place of honor, but near the door, half wrapped in a cloth to keep the moisture out. He may be called upon to arbitrate disputes, to collect levies, to maintain a small watch on village affairs. These tasks are expected of one in his position, but they do not grant him ease. And so he lives year by year, caught between myth and mud, samurai by name, farmer by need. It is a contradiction that runs deep in the bones of Edo period Japan. One that reveals just how layered, how structured, how quietly conflicted this world was. Honor was everything, but survival was constant. As the lanterns are lit and the stars rise above distant mountains, our goshi rests, already dreaming of the next dawn, and the endless rhythm of duty. And with that gentle image, we now shift our focus. From the fields to the fires of ambition. Oda Nobunaga, firearms and fracture in feudal Japan. Now, imagine the air is heavier. The stillness of the countryside is replaced by the low hum of a growing city, rising from the plains of Owari province. The year is 1560. Japan is fragmented, divided among dozens of feuding daimyo, each ruling their own territories like kings, each vying for more. Into this fractured landscape steps a man both feared and misunderstood. His name is Oda Nobunaga. If the peasant samurai of the last chapter embodied contradiction, then Nobunaga embodied transformation. He was not born into dominance, not destined, at least by lineage, to unify anything. And yet, through ambition, ruthlessness, and vision, he became the spark that lit the fire of a new Japan. But this is not a tale of battles, not told in clash and roar. Tonight we look at him differently, not as conqueror, but as a man of habits, contradictions, and quiet obsessions. Let's begin with tea. Yes, tea. Oda Nobunaga loved tea ceremonies. In his chambers, meticulously arranged tatami floors would welcome a select few, politicians, warriors, monks, each invited to sit in silence, to observe the delicate ritual of pouring and sipping. Everything about the ceremony was exacting. The movement of the hands, the placement of the utensils, the controlled calm of the room. And Nobunaga, who could order the burning of an entire monastery by morning, would sit by afternoon utterly still, as steam curled from a small ceramic cup. But let us not drift too far from the world he was shaping outside those chambers. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Nobunaga did not cling to tradition for its own sake. He embraced the strange, the foreign, the new. Where others scoffed at European firearms, he studied them. Where others mocked Christianity, he saw strategy. When Portuguese traders docked at Japanese shores with their unfamiliar weapons, most daimyo viewed the matchlock guns with suspicion. Slow to load, unreliable in the rain, unrefined. But Nobunaga saw something different, not weakness, but possibility. And so, he began to reshape warfare itself. He drilled his troops in coordinated volleys. He learned to protect his gunners behind wooden shields. At the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, his strategies would famously turn the tide, mowing down cavalry charges with chilling efficiency. Where swords once dictated status, smoke now drifted across the battlefield in quiet, methodical bursts. He was not a traditionalist, nor, in the eyes of many, a noble man. He dressed plainly, spoke bluntly, and did not shy from brutal decisions. The Buddhist monastery of Mount Hiei had once wielded both spiritual and military power. In 1571, after years of tension, Nobunaga ordered it destroyed. The fires burned for days, monks, manuscripts, and sacred relics, all gone in the haze. It was not justice, it was calculation. He had little patience for rivals, religious or otherwise, and yet, at the same time, he welcomed Jesuit missionaries not out of belief but leverage. He saw in them a way to counterbalance the power of entrenched Buddhist sects. Even art, he used as a tool. He collected rare objects, commissioned grand architecture, not out of aesthetic longing but to signal something powerful, that he, not Kyoto, not tradition, was the center now. At night, his fortress of Azuchi Castle would glow with lantern light. Its walls, layered with stone and adorned with paintings, stood not only to defend, but to dazzle. Inside, meetings were held on polished floors beneath ornate screens. Courtiers bowed low, envoys waited for hours, and when Nobunaga entered, silence reigned. He was a man who blended strategy with severity, aesthetics with efficiency, and though he was eventually betrayed, forced into suicide by one of his own generals in 1582, his shadow loomed long after his death. Because Nobunaga did not complete the unification of Japan, but he made it possible. He shattered the old, opened the door, and in the process, remade the idea of what a samurai ruler could be. Now, as we leave the echoes of gunfire behind and the war banners fade into twilight, we turn towards something else. Something quieter, but just as enduring. A story passed from hand to hand, retold in ink and theater. A tale of revenge. Or was it duty? The 47 Ronin. Revenge or loyalty play. The snow falls softly now. It settles on stone lanterns, on black-tiled rooftops, and on the narrow alleys of Edo, muffling the world into quiet. It is winter in 1703. A hush lies over the city. Beneath that hush, a secret plan has taken shape, woven from grief, honor, and a deep, slow-burning resolve. This is the story of the 47 Ronin. It is one of Japan's most retold legends, etched into woodblock prints, staged in kabuki theaters, whispered in the quiet corners of tea houses. But tonight, we won't speak it with drama. We will follow it as it unfolded, slowly, steadily, like footsteps in deep snow. Our tale begins not with swords, but with a bo, a ceremonial bo, performed clumsily by a provincial lord named Asano Naganori. It happened in Edo Castle, during a routine court ritual. He had been instructed by Kira Yoshinaka, a powerful and prickly court official, known more for his pride than his kindness. Kira allegedly insulted Asano, subtly, repeatedly, over days, perhaps weeks. No one knows exactly what was said, but something inside Asano broke. In a breach of strict court decorum, he drew his dagger within the palace walls. He lunged at Kira. It was not a killing blow, just a wound, but the act alone sealed his fate. Drawing a weapon within the shogun's palace was an unthinkable offense. By dusk, Asano was ordered to commit seppuku. His lands were confiscated, his retainers were dismissed, his family disgraced, and so, 47 of his former samurai became Ronin, masterless men, men without purpose, men carrying a weight not seen, but felt. They vanished. Scattered across towns and villages, they took on the guise of commoners. One became a carpenter, another posed as a beggar. Their leader, Oishi Kuranosuke, took to drinking in Kyoto's pleasure quarters, laughing loudly, seen stumbling through the streets. It was all a performance, because behind that performance lay a plan. They waited, not for days or weeks, but for nearly 2 years, patient, watching, disarming suspicion. Oishi wrote letters to Kira, appearing disinterested, Some say he even divorced his wife and sent his family away to protect them from what was to come. Then, on a cold December night, under a moonlit sky, they gathered. Clad in black, they surrounded Kira's estate. Snow blanketed the rooftops. Lanterns flickered behind paper screens. They moved with quiet precision. The guards were overwhelmed, quickly and cleanly. The Ronin searched the house, room by room, sliding open doors, checking behind curtains. Eventually, they found Kira, hiding in a small courtyard shed. They offered him the chance to die with honor, to take his own life. He refused, so they took it for him. And then, they didn't flee. They carried his head, wrapped carefully, and walked through the city before dawn to the Sengakuji Temple, where their master Asano was buried. There they placed the head upon his grave and knelt, not in triumph, but in completion. They had fulfilled what they saw as duty. The aftermath was complicated. The Ronin surrendered themselves. There were debates in the shogun's court. Were these men murderers or paragons of samurai virtue? Eventually, they too were ordered to die. But unlike their master, they were allowed to die as samurai, through ritual suicide, not execution. Each prepared for death in the quiet of the temple, surrounded by incense and the sound of distant bells. One by one, they left the world behind. Their graves still rest at Sengakuji, simple stone markers worn smooth by time. Visitors come quietly, even now, to leave incense, to bow, to wonder. But what exactly did they do? Was it revenge? Was it loyalty? Or was it something else entirely? Scholars and poets have argued for centuries. Some say they upheld Bushido, the code of the warrior. Others say they clung to a fading ideal in an era that no longer made room for such gestures. Because by 1703, Japan was peaceful. The long civil wars were over. The shogunate had brought order. Violence, even for honor, was no longer so easily justified. Yet these 47 men acted as though it were still the Sengoku era. As though loyalty meant blood. As though the past had not ended. And that's why their story lingers. Not because it was heroic or right, but because it was out of time. A haunting echo of a code slowly being forgotten. And so we leave the snow-covered temple now. The incense smoke drifts upward, curling toward the rafters. As we move on, we look not to vengeance or violence, but to stillness, to the places where power sat quietly, behind painted screens, beneath tatami floors. Inside a daimyo castle, screens, strategy, and stillness. The doors slide open with a whisper. And now, we step into a different world entirely. Gone are the muddy rice fields, the snowy rooftops, the clatter of swords in the night. Here, in the stillness of a daimyo castle, the air itself feels hushed, measured, controlled, as if every movement must be considered before it is made. This is not the battlefield. This is the realm of protocol, architecture, ink, and silence. Imagine yourself standing just inside the outer gates of one such castle, somewhere in feudal Japan. The walls rise not in harsh stone, but in layers, earthen mounds, interlocking wooden panels, white plaster smooth to the touch. Beyond them, winding pathways and steep angles confuse unfamiliar footsteps, designed to slow intruders, to give the appearance of openness while concealing deadly purpose. But you are not an intruder. You are a guest, perhaps an emissary, perhaps a merchant, perhaps another lord. And so, you are led inside. The floors are polished to a muted sheen. They creak just slightly beneath soft-soled feet, on purpose. Every footstep echoes. Nothing here happens in secret. The corridors are long and gently lit by natural light filtering through latticed windows. Shoji screens, paper stretched thin over wooden frames, slide back to reveal open spaces, then close again like the turning of pages. The smell of hinoki cypress lingers in the air, clean, dry, and faintly sweet. It blends with the scent of ink, of incense, of fresh tatami mats made from tightly woven rushes. Everything here is meticulous, and yet, behind the quiet elegance, lies strategy. A daimyo castle is not only a residence, it is a stage, a symbol of power, a trap laid in layers. The inner keep, or tenshu, sits at the heart like a chess king surrounded by loyal pieces. From its upper floors, the daimyo, or regional lord, may observe the layout of his lands. Below, administrative offices manage rice tax, land records, messages to Edo, and military readiness. But even these tasks unfold with ritual. Morning begins with silence. The daimyo wakes before the sun is high. Attendants bring a basin for washing, a lacquered bowl with clear water. The lord's robes are chosen not for comfort, but for meaning. The pattern of cranes or pine branches, the shade of indigo or charcoal gray, all speak of status and restraint. A small breakfast, perhaps pickled vegetables, rice, a bit of fish, is taken privately. Conversations are brief. Words, like gestures, are measured carefully. And then come the audiences. Courtiers and retainers line up outside the reception room. They kneel when entering. They speak in practiced phrases. Their backs never turn to the Lord. Rank and deference shape every movement. At the far end of the room sits the daimyo, on a raised platform, legs tucked beneath him, posture perfect. Behind him a gilded screen painted with cranes and clouds casts a golden glow. But do not be deceived. Though the daimyo appears still, his mind is calculating. Who bows too low? Who avoids his gaze? Who delays in answering? Power is not always loud. Sometimes it's in who pours the tea. Sometimes it's in who remains silent just long enough for others to wonder. Messages arrive in folded paper. Brushstrokes flow across washi paper. Ink laid down with such care it could take a lifetime to master. One letter might concern a border dispute. Another, a wedding alliance. Another still, an invitation from Edo, or a summons. Every word has weight. The scribe, seated cross-legged in the corner, copies documents with eyes trained to catch the smallest mistake. Each document is folded, sealed, and tied with silk cord, then handed to a courier who will travel for days, by horseback, by foot, across rivers and mountains, to ensure it is delivered without fail. The wheels of governance turn slowly, but they never stop. Later in the day, the castle quiets. Meetings give way to poetry readings. A tea ceremony may be held in a small, sparse room where the sound of water boiling becomes more meaningful than speech. Even the weapons here are decorative, displayed above the tokonoma alcove, blades polished to a silver sheen, rarely drawn, always symbolic. The daimyo, now in lighter robes, may paint a few characters onto a fan. Perhaps a haiku, perhaps just a single word, a concept, stillness, wind, stone. Even leisure is bound by structure, and as dusk approaches, the castle grows even quieter. Servants extinguish lanterns one by one. Shoji are slid closed. Footsteps become fewer. The lord retires once more to his private quarters. A garden just outside the window shimmers with moonlight. The trees, carefully pruned, cast perfect shadows on the stone path. Here, in this silent fortress of paper and ink, the day ends as it began, in ritual, in stillness, in control. Not all power is exercised with swords. Not all threats are spoken aloud. In the castle, silence is both a weapon and a shield. Now our footsteps gently retreat. The castle fades behind us, its rhythms, its rooms, its measured breath. And as we leave this world of painted screens and ink-brushed orders, we prepare to return to our own. But not just yet. In a moment, we'll bring our journey to a close, with a gentle reflection on all that we've passed through, from rice paddies to rebellions, from servants' quarters to silent halls of power. A life cloaked in silence. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep. You're in a quiet place now. A place where time flows slowly, like candle wax down the side of a wooden sconce. Tonight we'll travel together, not to a battlefield or a royal court, but into the still halls of stone cloisters, into gardens enclosed by ivy-covered walls, into the ancient world of the medieval monk, a life not of action, but of repetition, of rhythm, of silence. It's a life that might sound serene, and at times, it was. The hush of early morning prayer, the distant coo of pigeons near the bell tower, the scent of parchment and beeswax polish, the gentle scratch of a quill across vellum, like wind brushing over dry leaves. But it was not easy. It was a life ruled by bells, by devotion, by cold stone and colder discipline. So, if you're ready, find your stillness. Let the day fade, and allow yourself to slip quietly into a monastery, where voices are hushed, sandals scuff across ancient floors, and time is kept by the rising sun, the tolling bell, and the turning of pages written by hand. Let's begin. Segment 1. What it was really like to be a medieval monk. Imagine waking before the sun, in a room of stone. There are no blankets, only a thin straw mattress, and the air bites at your skin even in spring. It is cold, but not sharp. A deep, old cold. The kind that settles into the walls and never leaves. Your day begins not with a stretch or a cup of tea, but with the sound of a bell. Not harsh, but steady. Calling, not commanding. This is the first of many. The bell is called the Matins bell. It rings in the darkness, often around 2 or 3 in the morning, summoning you and your fellow monks to prayer. It's the first of the 7 canonical hours, moments that divide and structure the entire day. You rise silently, always silently. The rule of Saint Benedict, followed by many monastic communities, emphasizes humility, obedience, and silence. Words are rare and deliberate. Conversations happen only when necessary, and even then, sparingly. You put on your robe, coarse and undyed, sandals on your feet though the stones beneath them are icy. There is no fire in the dormitory. Heat, like speech, is rationed. The walk to the chapel is quiet. Your breath forms faint clouds in the air, and the sound of sandals on flagstone fills the corridor with a soft rhythm. You are not alone, but no one looks at you. You all walk in one direction, like water flowing through a channel. Inside the chapel, the only light comes from a few candles, their flames dancing slightly with each step you take. You kneel. You pray. The words are familiar. Latin verses murmured from memory, passed down over generations. Your knees press into the stone, which is cold and unyielding, but you do not flinch. This is how it is. Matins can last for more than an hour. Sometimes after matins there is a short return to sleep. Sometimes not. The rest of the day is arranged like a woven cloth, each prayer hour a thread. There is lauds around dawn, prime just after sunrise, terce in mid-morning, sext at noon, none in mid-afternoon, vespers at sunset, and finally compline before sleep. Each of these hours is marked by prayer, each is framed by silence. Everything else, eating, working, reading, is shaped around them. Meals are plain, often bread, legumes, cheese or broth, occasionally fish. Never meat, not unless you're ill, or it's a major feast. Meals are taken in the refectory, a large hall with long wooden tables. No one speaks. One monk reads aloud from a holy text while the others chew quietly. Even your hunger must submit to the sacred order of the day. And there is work. Not all monks copied manuscripts. Many tended gardens, made ale, ground flour, baked bread, or maintained the cloisters. The work was not rushed, but it was constant. The body, like the soul, was expected to be of service. Yet for those trained in letters, the scriptorium was the heart of monastic life. Imagine it now. A long room. Narrow windows high in the walls, letting in pale sunlight. Rows of desks, some with wax tablets for notes, others with stretched parchment sheets pinned in place. A monk hunches over a page, his fingers stained with ink. He writes slowly, methodically, every letter carefully formed. Mistakes are rare and costly. The tools are basic, reed or feather quill, ink made from soot and vinegar, and patience beyond modern imagining. The silence here is deeper than prayer. It is the silence of thought, of discipline, of stillness, turned into sacred labor. Hours can pass. Days. A single Bible might take a year or more to copy. Outside, the seasons turn. Snow falls, melts. Crops are harvested and planted again. The world beyond the cloister shifts. Kings rise and fall. Battles rage. Cities burn. But within the monastery, the rhythm never changes. And for the monk, it is not monotony. It is devotion. The bell rings again. Another hour, another prayer, and then eventually compline, the final prayer before rest. As the sky darkens, candles are extinguished. The halls dim. Monks return to their beds in silence, as they do every evening. No final words, no chatter about the day. Just the quiet steps of sandals on stone, and sleep. If you were there, perhaps you would lie in the cold, listening to the wind brushing past the windows, your hands tucked under your robe. No possessions, no ambitions, no voice, unless it's in prayer. Just stillness, and the distant echo of the bell, already preparing to summon you again.
Segment 2. The Life of Bede. Britain's quiet chronicler. If you drift your thoughts now to the northern edge of early medieval England, where the land stretches out toward gray seas and windswept fields, you might find yourself near the mouth of the River Tyne. There, on the cold coast of Northumbria, stood a monastery known as Jarrow. It is here, among the sea, air, and monastic stone, that a quiet figure once walked. A man whose world rarely stretched beyond these sacred walls, yet whose writings would ripple through centuries. His name was Bede, known to us now as the Venerable Bede. He was not a warrior, not a king, nor a saint in the dramatic sense. He was a monk, a scholar, a recorder of time, a patient observer of the sacred and the mundane. He was in many ways the perfect embodiment of the medieval, monastic life, humble, methodical, and utterly devoted to knowledge. Bede was born around the year 673, during a time of shifting kingdoms and slow conversions. England was not yet a nation, but a patchwork of competing realms. Paganism still lingered in corners. Christianity was establishing itself, monastery by monastery, word by word. Orphaned young Bede was placed under the care of monks at Monkwearmouth Abbey, and later at its sister house, Jarrow. These two monasteries would become his entire world. He would write later, "I have spent all my life in this monastery, applying myself entirely to the study of the scriptures. From the time he was 7 years old, the rhythm of his life was cloistered. He was shaped by bells, by books, by Latin hymns sung in candlelight. There are no stories of him wandering, or fighting, or defying. There is instead the image of a man at a wooden desk, bent gently over parchment. And yet, from this quiet corner, he would map out history. His most famous work, the Ecclesiastical History of the English People, was completed in 731. It is one of the most valuable sources we have for understanding early English history. But Bede did more than compile events. He gave time itself a structure. You see, Bede was one of the first to use the term Anno Domini in the year of our Lord to mark time from the supposed birth of Christ. Before Bede, people dated events based on the reigns of kings or the years since a particular council. But Bede's method offered something unified, something lasting. It's the same dating system used across much of the world today. Imagine that. A monk who rarely left his monastery creating the framework for modern chronology, his days were filled with learning. He studied scripture, certainly, but also science, language, poetry, and natural philosophy. He wrote treatises on timekeeping, Easter calculations, and even Latin grammar. He translated the Gospel of John into Old English for those who could not read Latin, though this version has sadly been lost. In his later years, Bede became nearly blind. Still, he continued to dictate, working with a young scribe named Wilberth. It is said that in the final hours of his life, Bede insisted on finishing his translation work. He dictated the final lines from bed, breath weakening, voice softening. When the last phrase was completed, he whispered, "It is finished," and then he died. There was no grand funeral procession, no golden tomb. The body was laid in the monastery, among the very stones that had sheltered him all his life. Later, his remains were moved to Durham Cathedral, where he rests to this day in a simple shrine. But his legacy does not rest, because every time we speak of centuries and numbers, of timelines stretching forward or backward from a common birth, we echo Bede. He did not shout to be remembered. He whispered, and still we listen. So as you breathe slowly now, consider the life of a man who walked only the cloister, yet measured the ages, scratch of his quill on vellum, the hush of candles burning beside his desk. the steady beat of monastic bells, and the gentle, endless unfolding of time. Segment 3. The Voynich Manuscript. The book no one can read now, let your mind float. Far from the wind-swept cloisters of Jarrow, the scent of aged parchment mingles with old wood and ink. The only sound is the gentle turn of a page. Before you lies a book. It is unlike any other. Its parchment is smooth, cream-colored. Its writing, meticulous, looping, strangely elegant is, in a language no one has ever understood. A language not found anywhere else in human record. Accompanying the script are illustrations. Some are botanical strange plants drawn with care, yet unknown to science. Others show star charts, elaborate circles, and symbols that resemble both the zodiac and something far more arcane. There are even pages filled with naked female figures bathing in interconnected pools and tubes, often in strange poses, as if part of some unknown ritual or perhaps a medical procedure. Their faces are calm, their eyes closed. This book is the Voynich Manuscript, named after Wilfrid Voynich, Polish bookseller who purchased it in 1912 from a Jesuit college in Italy. But the manuscript itself is much older. Carbon dating suggests it was created in the early 1400s during the Renaissance's dawn, though no one knows who wrote it, why, or what it says. Imagine that. A book at least 600 years old, written in a code or language entirely unknown. A book studied by cryptographers, linguists, and historians alike. A book still whispering secrets. Its script flows effortlessly as though whoever wrote it knew exactly what they meant. It doesn't appear random, but the alphabet doesn't match anything we know. Some believe it's a cipher, though no code has cracked it. Others think it's a constructed language perhaps created as a private journal by an eccentric mind. Some suggest it was an elaborate medical or herbal guide from a now-lost tradition. Curious theories. Some say it's a hoax, carefully crafted nonsense meant to fool collectors. Others say it might be a record from another world, or a text dictated in trance. But even the idea of a hoax leaves mysteries behind. Why would someone go to such immense effort, writing over 200 pages by hand in a fully invented language, complete with illustrations and logical structure? And if it were a trick, why is it so consistent, so thorough, so haunting? It sits today at Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book Library. You can view it online. Scholars still try to solve it, but in a way, it resists. There is something strangely calming about that resistance, but all things want to be understood. Like an unreadable lullaby, it's a riddle that asks nothing of you, just ink and intention suspended in time. Perhaps the Voynich manuscript was meant to be read only by its creator, or perhaps it was always meant to be unreadable, a book for silence, for wonder, for dreams. So let your thoughts settle now. Picture the manuscript resting in a quiet room, surrounded by the weight of centuries. Its pages closed, yet brimming with unsolved meaning. No noise, no urgency, just the endless hush of language you cannot decipher, yet somehow still feel comfort in the unknown, a peace in the unreadable. Segment 4. The Abbot's Chamber. Power and piety. Let us now walk further inside the monastery. Past the scriptoria, past the kitchens, beyond the cloistered garden where herbs quietly grow under the watchful care of novices. A heavy door of thick oak and quiet hinges. This is the abbot's chamber. The room is neither ostentatious nor Barit walks, a delicate line between simplicity and influence. A finely woven rug softens the stone beneath your feet. Shelves of manuscripts and codices line the walls. The abbot is not here now, but the silence he prefers remains behind. For in the medieval monastery, the abbot was not just a spiritual father, he was a ruler, was a manager, and sometimes a quiet politician. He oversaw not only the prayers of the monks, but also the lands and wealth that funded their way of life. His was a role steeped in both reverence and responsibility. Imagine being in his shoes, soft-souled, yet heavy with duty. The abbot might begin his day long before dawn, rising not only to pray, but to oversee the practical affairs of the monastery. He would meet with stewards, discuss the grain harvest, prove repairs to the fish ponds, and perhaps settle disputes among the serfs who lived on the abbey's lands. For though monks lived in seclusion, monasteries often held vast estates gifts from kings, nobles, and the pious who sought salvation and patronage. And so, the abbot learned to write as skillfully as any scribe, and to negotiate with landowners and bishops alike. He might receive emissaries from distant towns or entertain noble guests seeking advice, healing, or even sanctuary. A life devoted to God did not mean freedom from influence. And yet, for all his power, the abbot was still a monk. He, too, walked in silence between prayers. He, too, fasted. Two knelt on cold stone in the winter chapel, as the wind hissed through cracks in the masonry. His chamber, though quiet, held echoes of contradiction. The cabinet might contain an ornate silver chalice gifted by a king. Yet the bed nearby was a narrow wooden frame, with a straw-stuffed mattress and a woolen blanket. One symbolized the monastery's wealth, the other the soul's simplicity. In the corner stood a writing desk, where the abbot would reflect on matters of theology, governance, and the eternal balance between this world and the next. Above the desk, perhaps a crucifix, or perhaps a small icon painted in egg tempera and gold leaf, something not to decorate, but to anchor the eyes during long hours of thought. You might imagine the abbot alone, writing by candlelight. His pen moved slowly, not in haste, not with flourish, but with quiet determination. Each stroke is deliberate. He writes not just for the moment, but for memory, for the silent record of a life spent balancing devotion and decision. He pauses to look out the narrow window. Beyond it, the countryside stretches in silence. Fields, woods, and villages that rely on the monastery not only for prayer, but for food, medicine, and justice. And as he turns back to his work, the chamber remains hushed. Not a throne, not a palace, but a desk, a candle, and the weight of choices made under vows of silence. As we leave the abbot's chamber, the door swings closed behind us. The soft click of the latch fades into the stone hall, as if it were never open at all. In stillness, a different kind of history, and now. The final prayers have been whispered, the final candle has been snuffed out. The corridors of stone have fallen back into stillness, save for the occasional creak of ancient wood or the soft rustle of woolen robes shifting in sleep. Forests breathe in moonlight. The stars above glimmer softly and changed, since these monks last gazed upward centuries ago. Lives ruled by bells and guided by silence. Through the scratch of quill on parchment, through the careful copying of texts, through a routine repeated every day without complaint or question, he anchored time not by moving forward, but by holding still. You've felt the cold flagstones underfoot. You've met the nameless monk bent over a candlelit desk, the scholar bede writing time into order, the mystery of an undeciphered book still keeping its secrets, and the abbot alone in his chamber, balancing parchment and power. They did not live exciting lives as we might define them. They did not conquer or rule or sail into storms, but they endured, and they wrote. And they kept the embers of knowledge glowing in a world that so often threatened to go dark. Their world was not easy, but in the monotony there was meaning, and in stillness, a kind of history unlike any other. As you drift now whether into thought or into sleep, know that somewhere, deep in time, a monk once walked in silence, wrote a line that slowly, softly led to you. Good night. Sleep well. Setting sail into stillness, welcome, and drift with me now into the echoing silence of the past. Tonight, we unfurl the sails of memory and cast off into the age of exploration. Time often romanticized in stories of daring discovery and boundless adventure. But here in the gentle hush of this space, we step behind the myths. We sail not as captains or kings, but as the forgotten many who slept in damp darkness, ate hard biscuits with weevils for company, and watched the horizon remain unchanged for weeks on end. Imagine yourself lying on a narrow wooden plank below deck. The lanterns sway with the rhythm of the waves. The smell of tar, salt, and unwashed bodies hangs heavy in the still air. You're not quite asleep, ... Not quite awake, just drifting. As we will now, into the story of what it truly meant to live and labor aboard the creaking ships of exploration. Segment 1. Why you'd regret being a sailor in the age of exploration? Imagine waking each morning to the clanging of a ship's bell, the cry of gulls fading into open sea, and the dull ache of your back from another night spent curled in a hammock no wider than your shoulders. You were likely not a trained navigator or even a willing volunteer. Many sailors aboard these ships were pressed into service, a polite term for forced conscription. Young, poor, often desperate. Your world, once tied to solid ground, shrank to a wooden vessel about 100 feet long. Home to perhaps 80, 100, or even 200 men, depending on the ship. Privacy did not exist. Conversations were whispered. Secrets had nowhere to hide. Meals came twice a day, if they came at all. Dried peas, salt pork, and hardtack a thick, stale biscuit so dense with age and damp that it had to be soaked in water or ale just to chew. It's often infested with tiny, wriggling weevils. Some men picked them out, so others simply chewed with eyes closed, pretending. Fresh water was stored in wooden casks, but over time the water turned brackish and cloudy. The taste, described by those who lived it, was faintly of wood, mold, and rot. Some sailors drank ale instead, because they preferred it, but because it was safer. But even ale could not prevent what many feared most: scurvy. The slow disease crept through crews with brutal efficiency. First came the fatigue, then the bleeding gums. Teeth fell loose, wounds reopened. A man would sit silently, bones aching, knowing what was coming, and there was little to be done. Storms were another constant threat, and yet the worst storms were often not the ones above deck. Boredom, monotony, the sameness of sea and sky. For weeks, the view would not change. Sails might flap, but the wind could disappear. Becalmed, the ship sat, food spoiled, morale withered. Rats nested below, lice bred in clothing that could not be washed. Hygiene was minimal, showers did not exist. A bucket and seawater would suffice. Clothes were seldom removed, even when soaked in sweat or storm. And all this, for what? For landfall that might never come. For wages that were rarely paid on time. The chance, slim as it was, of returning home with a few coins and stories most wouldn't believe. But still, they sailed. Let us drift now to one such voyage. One of history's most grueling, noted in books, but paid for in blood, bone, and breath by nearly all who boarded. We turn now to Magellan's Voyage. Segment 2. Magellan's Voyage. The crew that didn't come back. The year is 1519. The sails are heavy with salt, and the wind hums softly through rigging that has not yet known the endless months ahead. In the harbor of Seville, 5 ships await their fate, small by modern standards, yet enormous in the hopes they carry. The Trinidad, the San Antonio, the Victoria, and the Santiago. They are bound for the Spice Islands, in an almost mythical place where nutmeg and cloves grow like leaves on trees, a fortune in flavor. At the helm of this ambitious fleet is Ferdinand Magellan, a man both bold and burdened, determined to find a westward passage to Asia. But this isn't a tale of triumph. It is a story of attrition, of a crew that set sail 270 strong, and returned fewer than 20. Imagine yourself among the sailors, your belongings no more than a bundle tied with rope. The ships are crowded, even before they move. The air thick with anticipation and smoke from last-minute repairs. You do not know what lies ahead and lie, that the sea is wide and the orders are clear. In those first weeks, spirits are high. The coast of Africa slips by on the horizon. The fleet crosses the Atlantic and arrives in what is now Brazil. Their lush forests sway in the breeze. New foods, new peoples. But the respite is short-lived. Southward they press, into waters colder and less forgiving. In the shadow of Patagonia, the fleet is trapped by winter. Ice gnaws at the hulls. The men shiver in soaked wool. As the days grow shorter, something else begins to freeze. Morale, mutiny brews. 3 of the 5 captains turn against Magellan. Quiet whispers become sharpened knives. There is a standoff in the snow, then blood. Magellan quells the rebellion. 1 captain is executed, another marooned, the 3rd forgiven. The price of unity is steep, but unity is needed, for worse lies ahead. They round what we now call the Strait of Magellan, a narrow, winding channel flanked by cliffs and wind. It takes over a month. The Santiago is lost to the rocks. The fleet presses on, now 4, then silence, the Pacific. So calm, It is named for its peace, but that stillness is a lie. For the ocean stretches vast and empty. No islands, no land, no resupply. For over 3 months, they sail without stopping. Food runs out. Leather bindings are boiled to make broth. Sawdust is stirred into porridge. Rats are caught, traded, eaten. Men die one by one, then 2, then 10. Scurvy returns with a vengeance. Gums rot, flesh peels. Sleep becomes a reprieve, and then a grave. When at last they land on Guam, it is not salvation. Supplies are taken, but tensions flare with locals. Then they press on to the Philippines. It is here that Magellan meets his end. He is drawn into a local conflict, a beach skirmish. His armor weighs him down in the shallows. Surrounded, he falls. The captain who charted the unknown dies not by storm or sickness, but by spear, far from home. The fleet, now 3 ships, limps toward the Spice Islands. One turns back, another is burned. Only the Victoria remains. She is commanded now by Juan Elcano, a name fewer remember, but one who saw the journey through. The Victoria, patched and weary, rounds the Cape of Good Hope. Supplies are thin. The men are gaunt, but at last Spain, of the original 270, 18 return. 18 men, hollow-eyed and sun-weathered. They step ashore with silence, not celebration. Their voyage had circled the globe, the first ever, but they did not feel like victors. They felt like survivors. And so ends the journey of Magellan, not in glory, but in endurance. Now, let us drift further still. Not to another sea, but to a strange book. One with no known language, no clear author, and no certain meaning. A mystery tucked deep in the folds of history. We turn now to the Voynich manuscript. Segment 3. The Voynich manuscript. The book No One Can Read the Voyage of Magellan was a story written in wind, water, and the slow attrition of flesh. But now, we turn to a story written in ink, in curves, in leafy spirals. A book so strange, so resistant to explanation, that even in our modern age of algorithms and codebreakers, it remains silent. The Voynich manuscript. Imagine yourself in a quiet room. A high window lets in only the softest light. Dust hangs in the air like tiny constellations. Before you is a book not large, but oddly thick. Its vellum pages, made from calfskin, feel smooth and cool beneath your fingers. They whisper as they turn, and what they reveal is unlike anything you've seen. The writing doesn't match any known script. The letters curl, loop, and repeat in patterns that suggest grammar, rules, a real language, but none that we recognize. Line after line, page after page, the script flows without correction, as if the writer knew exactly what they were saying. But no one else ever has. Scholars, cryptographers, linguists, none have cracked the code. The manuscript seems structured, intentional, yet every effort to match it with known languages ends in silence. Then there are the illustrations. Soft, almost dreamlike botanical drawings. Plants with swollen roots, curling leaves, and impossible blossoms. Some vaguely resemble real herbs. Most do not. Turn the page, and you find women bathing in green pools, connected by plumbing that looks both ancient and futuristic. Stars and zodiac symbols scatter across circular charts. Recipes, perhaps, or rituals, or nothing at all. It is not a large book, just over 200 pages, though some are missing. It lives today in the Beinecke Rare Book Library at Yale, but its journey, there's a tale all its own. We know it surfaced in the early 20th century, purchased by Wilfred Voynich, a Polish book dealer. But its history stretches back much further. There are records of its presence in the court of the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, a man fascinated by alchemy and hidden knowledge. It may have passed through the hands of Jesuits, scholars, even occultists. Tests on the vellum place its creation in the early 1400s, but the script itself, still unknown. Some say it's a cipher code hiding sensitive knowledge. Others suspect it's a constructed language, invented for a purpose lost to time. And then there are those who whisper fraud, that it's a hoax. Elaborate, yes, but meaningless. Yet even that theory has its problems. The writing is too consistent, too purposeful. The effort would have been immense, with no known motive, no reward. Computer models have tried, patterns emerge, but no meaning. Even AI trained on countless languages fails to find a match, so we are left with a puzzle, a book that seems to speak, but only in riddles. A whisper from the past with no one to answer. What was its purpose? A medical text? A spiritual guide? A botanical journal from a world that never was? Or simply someone's private dream, written not for us, but for themselves? There is comfort in not knowing, in letting the mystery remain. And as you imagine that quiet room again, with the book open before you, and the strange script flowing like water across the page, you might feel something ancient and still settle over you. Not fear, not frustration, just wonder. Now, from the strange silence of the manuscript, we step back aboard ship, but not in the same part of the vessel as before. This time, we climb the ladder. We open the heavy wooden door at the back of the ship, past the cargo hold and gun deck, into the captain's quarters. Let us enter now the world of rank and contrast of polished forks and painted maps. Segment 4. Life on a galleon. Captain's quarters and colonial. Cargo, let us step gently now into another part of the same ship. A place few of the crew ever entered. A door thick with iron nails separates the hard labor of the lower decks from the quieter, more curated world of command. The captain's quarters. Imagine the muffled creak of the ship's timbers, the distant slap of waves against the hull, and then the slow groan of hinges as the door swings open. Inside, the air is different. Still heavy with salt and sea, but also with wax from candles, with leather and polished wood. A writing desk stands near a narrow window, its panes clouded with salt spray. A globe, cracked and faded, rests on a shelf beside bound ledgers and navigational instruments wrapped in velvet. This is where orders are written, where charts are unfurled across the table and routes drawn in measured, deliberate strokes. The captain slept not in a hammock, but in a low bed tucked into one corner, still cramped, but with blankets instead of bare wood. Meals arrived on pewter plates, with spoons and knives of real silver. Salted pork, dried fruits, and sometimes rarely a bottle of wine. But this quiet was earned, not only through rank, but through a burden of constant decision, for storms did not knock before they struck. And cargo was everything. These galleons were not built merely for speed or battle. They were engines of empire, loaded deep with goods from distant lands. Cotton, cinnamon, silver, sugar, all packed into wooden crates and secured with rope netting in the hold. Every barrel had its value. Every space was measured, every risk calculated. When the ship finally arrived at Port Lisbon, Seville, Antwerp, the captain would step ashore not with stories, but with ledgers. The measure of success was not adventure, but profit. Contrast this with the men who stayed behind, who climbed the rigging in storm and stifling heat, who ate in shifts on the floor near the cannon. For them, the voyage brought little but toil. Yet some would glance toward the captain's door with quiet envy, and some one day would ascend the ranks, but most would not. Even among officers, life had layers. The first mate shared the cabin but slept on a bench. The quartermaster dined with the captain, but was not his equal. Rank was a ladder with slippery rungs, and each one bore weight. The ship itself was a floating hierarchy. Above, the sails cracked like whips. Below, the hull groaned with the strain of the ocean. And here in the center, in the painted world of brass compasses and candlelit maps, decisions were made. Not always fairly, not always wisely, but always in motion. Imagine the ship at dusk. The sky a soft violet, the sea calm for now. Inside the captain's quarters, the candlelight flickers as he studies the stars through a brass astrolabe. Behind him, the door is shut, and behind that door, the sounds return. Boots on deck, cough, a laugh, a shout. The ship is alive. But for a moment, in this narrow, wood-paneled room, there is only stillness, calculation, waiting, and so we too wait. As the ship glides forward toward another coastline, another port, another trade wind, we come to the end of our passage together. It's time now to gently return to the stillness of your own room your own quiet waters. Let us close this journey with one final reflection. Conclusion. Drifting home from distant waters, history is often told in terms of greatness, bold discoveries, glorious battles, shining triumphs. But beneath those headlines lies another story, a slower one, a quieter one. The story of those who hoisted the sails, who cleaned the decks, charted the stars, but never had their names recorded. Their lives were uncomfortable, uncertain, and often unrewarded. But they formed the backbone of exploration. They were the ones who endured. And though the sea no longer demands our sweat and sacrifice in quite the same way, its lessons remain. That patience matters. That small, repeated tasks, tying a rope, trimming a sail, turning a page can, change the world. So as your eyes grow heavier and your breath slows to the rhythm of imagined waves, remember, history is not only the roar of cannons or the signing of treaties. It is also the sound of creaking wood, the scratch of ink on parchment, the soft lapping of water against a hull in the dark. And in that quiet, you are welcome to rest. Good night.